I'm Jess Warner and I'll be chairing. I'm the Associate Director at Lansons. Lansons is a reputation management and PR consultancy. We work with large financial institutions, fintech startups, and just about everyone in between. I'm delighted to welcome you to our panel where we are going to be discussing how traditional financial services companies can remain competitive in the face of mass digital disruption. So should they innovate or invest, acquire or incubate, accelerate or collaborate? And I'm joined by a panel uniquely placed to answer these questions. So starting from the end, we have Simon Rogerson, who's CEO of Octopus Investments and co-founder of the Octopus Group. Simon was EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017, and Octopus is one of the UK's fastest growing companies. Next to Simon, we have Sharon Henley, for Head of Marketing for the Royal Mint. Sharon brings new products to market, including Royal Mint Gold, which is the Mint's blockchain technology project. And Sharon is also on the board of the British Blockchain Association. Next to Sharon, we have Lyle Wraxall, who is CEO of Isle of Man Digital, which is the government agency responsible for stimulating growth of digital business on the Isle of Man. And before arriving on the Isle of Man, Lyle consulted a number of technology businesses across the world. And then next to me, we have Tim Evans. So Tim is Head of Innovation and Fintech Alliances at Hargreaves Lansdown, has been working in financial services for about 32 years across the world with large corporates, family offices and startups. So welcome everybody. Now we're going to start by diving straight in and tackling our panel topic head on. So with you, Tim, as Head of Innovation and Fintech Alliances for a long-established financial services brand, how do you think financial services companies that may be considered traditional can remain competitive?
I guess the simplest answer is collaboration. So I was having a chat a few months ago now with one of the partners at Elixir, which is a challenger consultancy in London. And one of their mantras, if you like, is you can't out-innovate the market anymore. And if you look at the pace of the markets, regardless of whether it's the FS industry or not, the fact that they are more digital, more complex, more linear, more dynamic, it's incredibly difficult for large FS institutions, which have a lot of legacy systems, not just technical debt, but organizational debt, to keep up with that. And so collaboration is absolutely key for it. If you look at the likes of HSBC and First Direct, and what they've done with Bud Financial, with the Arthur app, that's a very good example, almost of the triumvirate there of the fintech in Bud, First Direct, which was kind of a market leader in its own right, and then the large FS in HSBC. But I think the thing is, though, there's probably not a cookie-cutter approach to how you collaborate. It's a question of how you want to design or define collaboration. And in many ways, that comes back to what your particular position is as a company and the particular situation you're in. So, do you want to just observe the emerging technologies and sit on the outside before you dip your toe in? Do you want to partner, which is probably more of the purest approach to collaboration, or do you want to invest and you can incubate off of the side of that, or go full bore to acquisition of a company, which tends to be more of a defensive strategy than an offensive one these days. But the general rule of thumb around working out what you do around your collaboration strategy comes down to how close is the thing that you're disrupting to your core market, how easy or accessible are the talents and resources that you need to deliver it, and has the market reached its inflection point? So how urgent is it for you to do something? That's why the acquisition piece comes up. And probably the third thing I'd just say is it's smarter leverage of assets. So whether that's people on demand, whether that's data, the Kaggles of this world, or anything that allows you to harness that fintech talent.
Thank you. And I think three really well-made points. The one I want to pick up with you, Sharon, is the point on collaboration. That's obviously something that the Royal Mint has really harnessed with the Royal Mint Gold blockchain project. It'd be great if you could tell us a bit about that.
So absolutely. I think that one of the gentlemen in one of the discussions before us talked about bringing a good project to market. And he really said that there were three elements. And he said you need a good idea, you need the ability to execute on it, and you also need the ability to monetize the project. And so I think the Royal Mint, so just to give you a little bit of background about what we're doing. So the Royal Mint, as you probably know, are the people that make the currency that you'll find in your change, or your loose change. And we obviously understand well and truly that the world is changing, that people are spending, buying things in a different way. And so about 3 years ago, we thought about blockchain and we thought how we could innovate, do something different, get with the times. But I think right from the get-go, it's like, okay, great, we've got a good idea, let's put gold onto blockchain. It has a lot of utility. It could be an investment product, you could save it, you could hedge it, you could use it for speculation. And then we were thinking, well, you know, in the future, we could then look at payments and remittances. But then again, that's just the good idea. Then the hard thing, especially with such a nascent technology as blockchain, especially back 2-3 years ago, was, well, how are we going to do that? So that's where the collaboration and partnerships came in, because we had to go out and find technology or companies that could bring a technology of a blockchain platform that then talks about wallets. And then it was like, well, okay, the third aspect is monetization. So, okay, that's great. We've got this technology, we've got gold, we've got it on a blockchain, but we still need to be able to monetize it. So then that's also collaboration with partnerships. So on top of the technology providers, it's actually providing that baseline technology. We then had to work with another company, which happens to be CME, which brings their expertise in trading. And that also helped us to basically monetize the product, because while we've got a lot of history, we're 1,100-year-old companies, so we've got a lot of history in gold and that sort of thing, but we don't really have any history in trading or financial services. So we had to get in a lot of different expertise to essentially bring this product to market. And as the gentleman said here, is like, it's not cookie cutter either. So we've also made a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think that that's also something that we tend not to, or the industry tends not to talk about so much, especially in the blockchain space. We've been having a lot of conversations about how people are amazing, successfully doing these projects. But I think that also, there's also a lot of learning that can happen out of the failures. But again, going back to this collaboration, and also incorporating that whole test and learn environment, I think with a brand like ours, it's very important that we uphold a reputation, that we don't take too much of a risk. But obviously putting gold onto blockchain when, especially, it's now a bit different now, but about 6 to 8 months ago, I think blockchain was very synonymous with Bitcoin. So everyone was like, oh, you know, you don't want to get into Bitcoin. It's like, well, we're not. So there was a lot of learning. I think fortunately now we're getting past that stage and people are a lot more educated into what blockchain is. But even then, we've made mistakes, and it's really about bringing in expertise that can help you navigate the waters. So also when you're right front and foremost in something, it's also really understanding how to bring all the players along with you. So we had this good idea, we take it to market, and then we realize that the customers that we actually want to sell the product to aren't really quite with us yet. So we've also had to kind of go back and bring our customers along. And it's really understanding also what the customer wants in this journey. And so for us as well, we've also had to then take a step back and think about regulation and how it really fits into the ecosystem of today. So it's all well and good to think about tomorrow, what tomorrow looks like, but you've got to realize that these two ecosystems all kind of have to play together. So again, it's also a lot about test and learning, but for us, it was really bringing in the experts and really knowing that you don't know what you don't know and asking for help.
Thank you, Sharon. And I think a lot of the words we were using there, test and learn and collaboration, those are the kind of the buzzwords that we're hearing when we're talking about fintech and the future of fintech and the future of traditional financial services businesses in that context. I think another word that we've heard a lot today and that we always hear in relation to fintech is being innovative and innovating. So I'm going to be interested in your take on what does innovative really mean and what's the perfect environment for innovation to flourish in?
Sure. So innovation to me is a mindset. So it's a willingness to change. It's a belief there's going to be a better way. I think there are two key ingredients to delivering innovation. The first is cultural. So I don't think technology is the hard part. I think the hard part is changing the working practice and the culture within an organization. and that culture of innovation needs to be across everybody in the business. So I think the organizations which are hiring a head of innovation or a head of digital and thinking that they are going to be the solution will have a few problems down the line. I think you need to change the culture of being afraid of failing. So financial services companies historically very good at hiring very smart people, but they're one-dimensionally smart. They're the people that were very good at school, they got good GCSEs, good A-levels, good university degree, probably passed all their professional exams first time, but they spend their career avoiding things which might put them at risk. They don't like to feel embarrassed in front of their colleagues. They don't cope with ambiguity particularly well, and that means the culture of innovation doesn't exist. And the third element around culture is leadership. So financial services companies are very good at command control. They're typically very hierarchical. And if you want to create innovation, then you need something which is much flatter. You need to empower your people. You need to trust them. And the second big element in terms of creating innovation is patience. So it requires quite a lot of money and a lot of time to deliver innovation. It doesn't happen overnight. And I think for most financial services companies, certainly the ones that are quoted, beholden to what the stock market wants of them, what the analyst expectations are, delivering that over a 2-3 year period just isn't possible. In terms of the right kind of environment, what I would say and what we've done in our case is do not put these people or these teams of people in the same building as your core business. There is too much ingrained thinking, there is too much legacy. The job of the leader is to find the most entrepreneurial people in your company and put them in a separate physical location, protect them from the mothership at all times, wait until they can benefit and leverage off the mothership. And in most financial service companies, that leverage comes from the distribution machine. So most big financial service companies, they have their prize asset is their big customer base, their distribution. You should leverage off that. And the final thing I would say is the world is definitely changing more quickly than it has ever changed. So I think organizations, you have two choices. You can either choose to innovate and disrupt yourself, or you can wait for that disruption to happen to you. And if you wait for the disruption to happen to you, it's going to be extremely painful. You can see what's happening in the retail world as Amazon steamrolls everybody. We have an energy supply business, Octopus Energy. That's what we're trying to do to the big six because their business model is inherently inefficient and they're unable to innovate from within. And I think the same thing will happen in financial services as well. It will be slower to happen there because for most customers, they are not necessarily financially literate. It is a complicated world, and it takes longer for the transference of power to go from the corporates to the end customers, but it's absolutely coming.
Thanks, Simon. I think that's really strong advice. But I think from the three of you that have spoken so far, what's coming out and is really clear is that there isn't a cookie-cutter approach to this. It isn't a case of do I innovate, do I incubate, do I accelerate? Is that right, Lyle? And then also I'd be interested in what's going on in the Isle of Man in relation to fintech innovation too.
I think just echoing what Tim said, I think we are seeing that the financial organisations have suffered from a level of technology debt. There is a huge focus, as we know, to become a bit more lean, be more cost efficient. So we're seeing a lot of that. But equally, we're seeing these organisations looking for the disruptives, the new technology that's going to give them that competitive edge. So we need the people to innovate to make that happen. Now, I've worked in this space both in London and in New York. I've just now in the Isle of Man, and it's actually a really interesting dynamic there because it's its own small jurisdiction. What this enables a lot of the startups we're seeing to do is to get involved with the financial institutions. We also have a big e-gaming sector, so that's leveraging a lot of comparable and parallel kind of activity where people can innovate. And because it's a smaller jurisdiction, what we're seeing is that people are much more accessible. So the coffee shops in the Isle of Man, of which there are many, are full of startup organizations who are often talking to CEOs of larger firms. And given the size of the Isle of Man, it creates a good test bed for testing out certain things within the e-gaming sector, within financial services. I think we're going to see more of that in financial services with the new ring fencing laws and so forth. So it creates a really good opportunity, and that's created a kind of incubator mentality in the Isle of Man, where you have corporate services providers who can give you all the legal help, set up the company, the business acumen that you need to be able to do that, but you have the freedom and the environment to create successfully. It's a really exciting time for us. We're seeing a lot of people in the space coming. I think, as Sharon said, not everybody succeeds all of the time, but because of the environment, the people who don't succeed are given the ability to move into other organisations that are doing well. So it's a very positive environment for them.
Brilliant, thanks, Niall.
I would add to that, because one of the conversations we were having backstage was about collaboration again, but instead of just thinking about the large financial services institutions collaborating with the fintechs, one of the points we're picking up on is, have we got the different layers of fintech collaborating the right way? So if you start to look at whether it's where open banking might go, open pensions, open wealth, various other aspects like that, it's an intersection between AI, IoT, blockchain, and open banking. It's not one or the other. And I think one thing we can do to try and encourage the fintechs is to collaborate between yourselves as much as it is with the other FS institutions.
Absolutely, it's that collaboration and that ecosystem, I think, which is something that came out from everyone. I'm conscious of time and wanting to take a few questions from the floor. I think if this screen pops them up. Aha. One directly for Simon there. So Simon, you talked about separating your innovation arm from traditional. At what point do you bring it together, and how is that best affected?
So I'll talk from, so we set it up 3 years ago. So we created something called Octopus Labs, which is the internal innovation arm at Octopus, whose job it is to create mass market disruptive financial services products. And it still hasn't been brought back into the mothership, and it's unlikely to be brought back into the mothership for the next few years. Simply because the speed of innovation within labs is way, way quicker than it is within the main investment business we have. But back to the point I was making earlier, you've got to leverage the distribution. So in our investment business, we have a really powerful distribution machine. We raise about £1 billion a year of retail investment money, about the same again in institutional money. And you build something in labs, and then you take those products and services and you put them down the same distribution channel. But the working practices, the people we hire over here, their ability to deal with ambiguity, the fact they tend to work in pods, the fact they tend to work in sprints, it's agile, is very different to a business that is only 18 years old, which is the core investment business we built back in 2000. So my preference would be keep them separate for as long as possible.
There's another one for you, Simon, but before we go to that, I'm just going to ask one to go down everyone, because I think I'd be particularly interested to know, and I think other people would be as well, is which technologies do you think are going to be the most disruptive for traditional financial services firms? We've obviously heard a lot today about blockchain and a lot about AI. Do you think those are the main ones, or is there something else around the corner that we're going to see popping up? Tim, what do you think?
Well, for me, it's kind of where open banking goes. I think it's starting with, current accounts, prepaid and credit cards. But actually, if you look at what's shaking out of the DWP around open pensions, and you start to bring all that data together with what already wealth and asset management platforms have, then you start to move towards this open wealth idea. And I think that's going to be really interesting, because whilst it's kind of got that big banner across it, it's still going to need to use AI, for example, to intersect with open banking to make it really powerful.
Oh.
So I'm not sure that we really do know that. I think AI is going to be a big disruptor. I think that blockchain ultimately will, but we need to understand exactly how we're going to use blockchain and where it's really going to deliver the most value. I think that's the challenge that a lot of startups are facing at the moment is identifying that right use case. I'd expect that would drive it forward.
So my head is really in blockchain, as you know, so that's what we're focusing on right now at the Mint. And I agree, blockchain is kind of like that hot topic at the moment, and I do think that there's a huge amount of opportunity for it to disrupt many, many things, but I still do think it goes back to the use case. And so I think in the brochure that we have, we wrote an article, and it was kind of about it feeling a bit like the Wild West of 1999, and everyone and his dog had to be a .com. And I think right now it feels like everybody wants to jump onto blockchain, but there are some very specific use cases, and there are some use cases that just don't make sense on a blockchain. And I think right now we're kind of sifting through what does and doesn't make sense. But I do think blockchain has a lot of opportunity. It's just really understanding where exactly that is.
I actually wouldn't. So I wouldn't look at a specific technology. I'd look where the customer need is greatest and where there's most pain. And if you're looking at the financial advice model, so the UK population is massively underserved from a financial advice model. We know the UK advisory market really well. It's a horribly inefficient model. I mean, these organisations, if Amazon runs at 80 out of 100, these organisations run at 20, 25, 30. Making those businesses and those people more efficient in how they can serve the population would be enormously powerful. So if you're looking at a particular opportunity, how tech can be used to make them more efficient, I would be looking there.
Brilliant. I think we've got time for a couple more from here. I wanted to pick out on I think it's meant to be collaboration is indeed key, but how do we pick the best partners in a forest full of potential fintech suppliers? I don't know if anyone wants to pick that up.
Blimey, that's a heck of a question, isn't it?
Well, at the Royal Mint, we say we've kissed a lot of frogs to get where we are. And again, 2-3 years ago, when we were picking our partners, we didn't really know ourselves exactly what we needed. So it was really having a lot of conversations with a lot of different people, to be honest. And it is about how you collaborate with them, bring the different teams together. So we had a lot of providers, and it was really about bringing them all together. So we had legal advice, we had financial advice, and we had the technology. And it's really kind of finding that team. So the team from all the different companies became our team. So we didn't really have the luxury, well, we did kind of separate it out from the Royal Mint, but we didn't have a luxury of having our own in-house department that could do this. So we had to bring them all together, bring them into the Royal Mint, but put them over to the side away from business as usual. And a lot of the partners were on basically how it felt to work with them, because they didn't have a lot of credentials, because there weren't really that many blockchain applications out there for them to prove that they have done it before. So it's, again, a lot of test and learn, and it's, unfortunately, at that point when there's no proven record, it is a bit of a gut feeling of how teams come together.
One avenue we've actually gone down to explore, because again, there's all that sense making 24/7 around how do you pick the right one and the wood from the trees, is if you look at some of the larger established players in things like digital identity, for example, a lot of these businesses themselves are having to keep up with everything else that's going on. So they're doing a lot of the sweeping out there with the radar in the first place, picking out which are the fintechs that are more likely to survive, to be honest, and more likely to have a successful impact on their own business. So if you then start utilising the partnership you've got there, then you kind of get that sense of who you should pick anyway.
Tim, someone's asked, do you have examples of successful partnerships you've developed that you can share?
Not in HL, because I've only been in there 12 months. Outside of that, it's I co-founded a business beforehand. That was an alt-fi business, end-to-end digital lending platform. And a lot of the successful partnerships we had there were with the cloud-based accounting packages. And again, it was mainly because they were thinking and acting and working in a completely different way. A lot of what Simon was calling out at the start around how you innovate.
I think the second one there could be a good one for you to answer, Lyle, with your management consultancy background, is what are the key elements in convincing a board to back an external innovation programme? What would your advice be?
So I think it kind of goes back what Simon just said in terms of really focusing on the pain that needs to be solved. So what's the value of doing this? And when pitching something like this to a board, it shouldn't be all about the technology, which it can be. It should be around what's the value it's going to bring. And typically when you're looking at the business case, you shouldn't be just focusing on a one-dimensional value case. You should be looking at what are the other tangential piece of value that can be brought together. How does it not just solve that problem, but how does it create a wider environment for further innovation or growing the economy in different ways?
Brilliant. I think we need to wrap up there. So, just in conclusion, I think thank you everyone for your contributions. It really does seem like collaboration is the word and is the way forward, but you've got to be prepared to kiss a few frogs on the way. But as Simon put it so well, it's not just about the tech, it's about the people, it's about the culture, and it's about harnessing that if traditional financial services companies are to stay competitive in the face of digital disruption. So thanks very much to our panel, Simon, Sharon, Lyle, and Tim.
Thank you very much. Thanks.